My sister brought her new boyfriend to Sunday dinner. Within an hour, he was making jokes about me in front of everyone. My family laughed along. I didn't say a word. I just smiled. Turns out that was the biggest mistake he ever made. My name's Andrew. I'm 34 years old. And until about 3 months ago, I genuinely thought my biggest annoyance in life was the guy at my office who microwaves fish for lunch. Not anymore. Now my biggest annoyance is a guy named Brennan, my sister's boyfriend of 6 weeks at the time, and how spectacularly badly he misjudged the room at a Sunday dinner that has since become the stuff of family legend. Stick with me, because this one's worth it. Quick background. I'm the middle kid. My older sister Camille is 37, married to a great guy named Patrick, 2 kids, the responsible older sibling routine. My younger sister Lainey is 29 and has always been what my mother lovingly calls a free spirit and what I lovingly call a walking tornado. Lainey is funny and charming, but she has the dating judgment of a raccoon picking what to drag out of a dumpster. Our parents, Glenn and Rosalind, have always had a soft spot for Lainey. Whatever Lainey wants, Lainey gets. When she crashed her first car, Dad bought her a new one. When she dropped out of college twice, they paid for the 3rd try. I'm not bitter. I made peace with it years ago. Camille and I are the reliable ones. Lainey is the project. I'm a software engineer for a mid-sized fintech company in Charlotte. I make a comfortable salary, I own my house outright, and I quietly build up a decent investment portfolio over the last decade. My family knows I work with computers. They do not really know what that means. My mother once asked me at Christmas if I could fix her printer, and when I said I'd take a look, she handed me a fax machine. I didn't have the heart to correct her. Sunday dinners at my parents' house are a long-standing tradition. Every other week the whole family gathers, eats too much pot roast, and pretends we all like each other for 3 hours. That particular Sunday, the drama had a name, and the name was Brennan. Lainey had been talking about Brennan for about 3 weeks. According to her, he was the most amazing man she had ever met. 32, a personal trainer at some boutique gym in the South End, and he was, in her words, going to take the fitness industry by storm with a supplement line he was about to launch. I had heard variations of this exact pitch from Lainey before. The boyfriend who was going to flip houses. The boyfriend who was going to start a podcast empire. So my expectations were calibrated accordingly, which is to say, low. I pulled up around 2. A glossy black Dodge Charger sat in the driveway that I assumed belonged to Brennan, because of course it did. I walked in and got my first look at the man himself. 6'2", the kind of overdeveloped chest and small legs that suggested he never missed an upper body day and had never met a leg day in his life. Fade haircut, black t-shirt clearly a size too small on purpose, and a watch that was either real and very expensive or fake and trying very hard. He was holding a protein shake in someone else's living room. On a Sunday, Lainey introduced us with a giant grin, like she was unveiling a new car. Brennan gave me a once-over I'd describe as polite contempt, then stuck out his hand for one of those bone-crusher handshakes guys do when they're trying to establish dominance in the first 3 seconds. I let him have it. I just smiled and said it was nice to meet him. The first hour was fine, mostly. Brennan dominated the conversation the way insecure people often do, with stories that all somehow ended with him being the smartest or the strongest or the funniest person in whatever situation he was describing. My parents nodded along like they were watching a particularly impressive nature documentary. Camille caught my eye across the room and gave me that micro-expression sisters give each other, the one that says, "I know, I see it too, just hold on." Dinner got served around 4. We sat down at the big dining table, and that's when Brennan apparently decided I was going to be the evening's entertainment. It started small. He asked what I did for a living. I told him, software engineer. He laughed. Like an actual laugh. He said, "Oh wow, so you're one of those guys who sits in a chair all day and forgets what the sun looks like." Everybody at the table chuckled. Lainey laughed loudest. My dad smiled. My mom said, "Oh Brennan," in a tone that was supposed to be scolding but was clearly delighted. Patrick looked uncomfortable and reached for the salt. Camille's jaw tightened. I just smiled and said, "That's pretty much accurate, yeah?" Then he went after my build. He said, "No offense, bro, but you look like you've got that skinny fat thing going on. You ever lift?" I'm not skinny fat. Even if I were, this was his first time meeting me. I said, "I do a little, here and there." He nodded like a doctor delivering bad news. Then he made a joke about my car, a 4-year-old Toyota Camry I bought in cash. He said, Must be nice driving a grandma car. No offense, I just like to feel something when I press the gas pedal. He looked around for laughs. Got them. Even my dad, who drives a Ford F-150 from 2008 and considers cruise control to be cutting-edge technology, chuckled. Then it was my house. When I mentioned I owned it, Brennan made a face like I'd just told him I lived in a cave. He went, must be a fixer-upper, huh? Lainey jumped in to inform him that I was really good with computers, like I was a kid who had just learned to ride a bike. The whole table laughed. My mother said, Andrew is very tech-savvy, like she was reading a Christmas card. I'm going to be honest. Something inside me went very quiet at that table. Not angry quiet, not yet. Just quiet. The kind of quiet you get when you realize the people you've been showing up for every other Sunday, for years, are perfectly comfortable letting a stranger they've known for 90 minutes use you as a punching bag because it's funnier than treating you like a person. I didn't say a word. I just smiled. I cut my pot roast. I asked my mom for the green beans. I told Patrick his haircut looked good. And inside my head, very calmly, I started making a list. Remember that detail, because that list is what this whole story is really about. I'll see you in part 2. So picking up where I left off. I drove home from that Sunday dinner, and I sat in my driveway for about 15 minutes before I got out of the car. Not crying, not raging, just thinking. There's a particular kind of clarity you get when you finally stop pretending. The fog lifts. You stop making excuses. You just see things as they are. I called Camille that night. She picked up on the first ring and said, before I even said hello, that whole thing was so messed up. I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I told her it wasn't her job to defend me. She said, no, but it was Mom and Dad's job, and they didn't. I told her I had a different plan, although I didn't tell her what it was yet, because at that point I didn't fully have one. I just knew I wasn't going to keep showing up like nothing had happened. 2 weeks went by. The next Sunday, I told my mom I had a work thing and couldn't make it. The Sunday after that, I told her I was traveling. The Sunday after that, I just didn't respond to her text. 3 Sundays in a row, no Andrew. My mother started sending those passive-aggressive messages. Quote, we miss you, end quote. Quote, your sister was asking about you, end quote. Quote, Brennan brought a coconut cake. You would have loved it, end quote. I read each one and put my phone face down. What I was actually doing during those Sundays was reconnecting with a part of my life I had let drift. I called my college roommate Sullivan, who I'd lost touch with for about a year. Sullivan is a corporate lawyer, the kind of guy who looks like he wandered out of a J.Crew catalog and remembers everything anyone has ever told him. After I described that dinner, he just shook his head and said, Andy, you have got to start treating yourself like an asset class, not a charity case. That line kind of became my motto for the next few months. In the meantime, Lainey called me once during this stretch, and it was not to apologize. It was to ask if I could help Brennan out with his website. Apparently Brennan's supplement company, which I learned was called Apex Forge Nutrition, was about to launch and he needed a website built. The quotes from real developers were too expensive, so could her brother who works with computers just whip something up real quick? For free. I was tempted to say no in a way that involved hanging up. But I had a different idea. I asked her to send me his contact info. I called Brennan the next day. He answered the phone like he was on a podcast. He said, oh hey bro, Lainey told me you might be able to hook a brother up. He actually called me bro, while asking me for free professional services 6 weeks after roasting my haircut at a dinner table. He spent 20 minutes telling me about Apex Forge. I asked him a few professional questions. Did he have an LLC? Did he have liability insurance? Did he have a manufacturer? Did he have FDA compliance documentation for the claims he wanted to make on the labels? He went silent on most of them. He said he was, quote, in the process, end quote, of all of it. Then he said, look bro, I just need a sick website. Something that looks fire. Can you do that or not? I told him I would think about it and get back to him. I hung up. And then I did something that, in hindsight, I'm a little proud of. I wrote down everything he had told me on that call, time-stamped, and saved it in a folder on my desktop. I called the folder Brennan. I had a feeling that folder was going to grow. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, I got dragged back into the family orbit. My mother called me crying because Lainey and Brennan had a fight and Lainey had stormed out and was crashing at my parents' house, and would I please come over because Lainey needed her family. I said yes, mostly because I wanted to see what was actually going on. Lainey was on the couch, puffy-eyed, telling everyone that Brennan had disrespected her by flirting with another woman at the gym. Then Brennan showed up at my parents' house, uninvited, halfway through dinner. He banged on the door. My dad let him in because my dad has the conflict tolerance of a tissue. Brennan came in with flowers from a gas station. The price tag was still on it. Lainey forgave him in about 4 minutes. He sat down at our table, ate the leftover pot roast, and then, I kid you not, started in on me again. This time it was about my dating life. He asked if I was seeing anyone. I said no. He laughed and said, "Yeah, I figured. I mean, you've got to put yourself out there, bro. Women like confidence." Then he turned to my mom and said, "No offense, Mrs. R, but Andrew gives off serious lonely uncle energy." My mom laughed. She actually laughed. Then she said, "Oh, stop it, Brennan. He just hasn't met the right girl." Like she was apologizing for me. To him. I excused myself to the bathroom, looked in the mirror for a second, and had what I can only describe as a clarity moment. I went back to the table, ate the rest of my food without talking, and left early. On my way out, Brennan called after me. "Hey bro, you ever going to get back to me on that website thing?" I turned, smiled, and said, "You know what, Brennan, I don't think I'm going to be able to help you with that." He said, "What? Why not?" I said, "You don't have the budget for me." And I walked out. Over the next week, 3 things happened that, when stacked together, lit a fuse. The first was that Camille called me, furious, because Brennan had been at a barbecue at her house and had spent the afternoon making fun of Patrick for being a corporate drone. Patrick is the kindest man I've ever met. Brennan called him a sellout to his face. Camille had asked her parents to say something. They didn't. The second was a text from an old buddy named Wesley, who I went to high school with. Wesley is a private investigator now, weirdly enough. He sent me an article from a local Charlotte news site. Some small business owner had filed a complaint about a personal trainer who had been pressuring his clients into investing in his upcoming supplement company and then disappearing with their money. Wesley sent it with a single message. "Isn't your sister dating a trainer named Brennan?" The third thing was that Lainey called me on a Wednesday night, late, and asked if she could borrow $8,000 to invest in Brennan's company. He'd told her it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get in on the ground floor. I told her I would think about it. I hung up. I sat in my office for a long time. I looked at the folder on my desktop named Brennan, and then I started to actually plan. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I'm not the kind of person who chases revenge. I'm honestly not. 9 times out of 10, when someone wrongs me, I just remove them from my life and move on. But there was something different about this situation, and it's because of what was at stake. My sister, my parents' savings, a guy who'd been ripping people off and was about to rip off my family next, while everyone laughed at me for being the boring brother who was, conveniently, the only person paying enough attention to notice. So I started simple. The morning after Lainey's loan request, I called Wesley back. I asked him if he'd be willing to take on a small job, totally informal, just looking to a guy. He said yes, no charge, because he owed me a favor from a network setup I'd done for his office a couple years back. I sent him everything. Full name, age, gym, supplement company, Instagram handle, make and model of his car. While Wesley was working his end, I started doing my own homework. I'm a software engineer. I know how to do research. I went deep on Apex Forge Nutrition. The website Brennan was so desperate to get built was, surprise, surprise, already partially built. He had a Squarespace site that looked like a high schooler had thrown it together at 3 in the morning. The product photos were stock images. The About Us page had a picture of him standing shirtless in front of a Mercedes that wasn't his because I could see the dealership name reflected in the window. The supplement labels were not registered with the FDA. The company itself was not registered as an LLC in North Carolina. The whole thing was, technically speaking, vapor. But here's where it got really interesting. He was running a pre-sale. He was telling people they could buy Founders packages of his supplements at a discount, and the product would ship in 8 to 12 weeks. He was collecting money via Venmo and a Cash App linked to his personal account. Not a business account. His personal account. He was collecting money from people in advance for a product that legally did not exist. I documented all of it. Screenshots, timestamps, archive links so the pages couldn't be edited later. The folder on my desktop grew from a few notes to a 60-page PDF. Wesley got back to me 4 days later. Brennan had 2 prior civil judgments against him in 2 different states. both for money he had taken from people for various business ventures that never materialized. He'd been a personal trainer in Tampa before Charlotte and had left under what Wesley described as a quote cloud, end quote, after a similar pre-sale scheme involving meal plans. He had no formal nutrition certification despite claiming 3 different ones on his Instagram. His real first name wasn't Brennan, by the way. It was Bradley. Brennan was a name he'd started using when he moved to Charlotte. The man was, essentially, a small-time grifter touring the Southeast. Now, while I was quietly building my Brennan dossier, my actual life was going extremely well. I think a lot of it was because I had finally stopped trying to win the approval of people who weren't going to give it to me. I got a major promotion at work. I'd been pitching an internal project for about a year, a complete overhaul of our payment processing infrastructure, and my boss finally greenlit it. I was made the lead architect. The bonus alone was bigger than the salary I'd had 3 years prior. I didn't tell my parents. I told Camille and Patrick, who took me out to a steakhouse to celebrate, and I told Sullivan, who toasted me with a glass of bourbon and said, "Asset class. Baby, asset class." I also started dating. Sullivan dragged me to a charity event for one of his firm's nonprofit clients, and I met a woman named Jocelyn who works as a program director for a literacy nonprofit. She is, and I say this with full awareness of how cheesy it sounds, the kindest person I have ever met. Dry sense of humor, calls me out when I'm being too in my head, and she once cried at a commercial for car insurance because the dog in it looked sad. She knew about the family stuff before we'd been dating a month, and her exact response was, "I have an opinion, but I want you to ask for it before I give it." That, my friends, is a green flag bouquet. I was also lifting more seriously, partly out of spite, but mostly because I had the time and the headspace. By the time 3 months had passed since that original Sunday dinner, I was in the best shape of my adult life. But here's the thing. I felt good not because of the muscle or the promotion or even Jocelyn. I felt good because I had stopped letting my family define me. Lainey kept calling. The first voicemails were guilt trips. The next were specific. Quote, "So about that loan," end quote. The last were angry. I didn't pick up. I wasn't ready yet. Then my mother called me one evening and told me, in the kind of voice she uses when she's about to drop a guilt grenade, that she and my dad had decided to lend Lainey $12,000 to invest in Brennan's company. She said, quote, "We know you don't agree with everything Lainey does, but she's family, and Brennan is going to be very successful. You can see it in his energy," end quote. I sat with the phone to my ear and felt my jaw tighten so hard I thought I'd crack a tooth. I asked her to please not send the money yet, to wait 1 week. I told her I had been doing some research and I had concerns. She got defensive. She said, "Oh, Andrew, not everything is a computer problem you can solve with your spreadsheets." She actually said that to me. She said, "Sweetie, I love that you care, but we know what we're doing." I told her I loved her, told her to please just wait 1 week, and hung up. That night, I called Sullivan. I told him everything. About Brennan, the dossier, the prior judgments, the unregistered company, my parents about to send a stranger $12,000, Lainey about to send 8 more on top of that. Sullivan listened, didn't interrupt, and when I was done he said, "Okay, tell me what you want to do." I told him exactly what I wanted to do. He laughed, that small dry laugh he has, and he said, "Andy, I've never seen you like this. I love it. Let's do it the right way." He gave me a list of 3 names, 2 attorneys, and a forensic accountant. He said, "When this goes down, you call me first. I want a front row seat." I hung up the phone and looked out my window at the streetlights. I was calm in a way I hadn't been calm in months. I had a folder, I had a network, I had a plan, and I had one very specific Sunday dinner in mind. The next 2 weeks were the most focused I have ever been in my life. I want you to understand that none of what happened next was about humiliating Brennan for sport. It was about protecting my family, even the parts of my family that didn't deserve protecting in that moment, and making sure he could not do this to anyone else. The first thing I did was get on a video call with one of the attorneys Sullivan recommended. Her name was Rosalind. She was about my age. She ran a small consumer protection practice, and she got it within about 90 seconds. She looked at the dossier and said this, quote, "Your guy isn't just sketchy, he's actively committing fraud. Pre-sale of unregistered nutritional supplements, soliciting investment without proper disclosures, operating a business without registration, and based on what your investigator found, this is part of a pattern." The Attorney General's office has a consumer protection division. They will be very interested. End quote. I asked her what my options were. Option 1. I just block Brennan from my family by exposing him privately and let him quietly slink away. Option 2. I report him to the state and let the law handle it. Option 3. Both. I asked her if my parents and Lainey could lose their money before any of this resolved. She said yes, almost certainly. So I made a decision. I was going to do this in a specific order. First, make absolutely certain that no money from my family ever reached him. Second, expose him to my family in person so no one could later claim it was a misunderstanding. Third, hand the entire dossier to the state through Rosalind. I called my mother the next morning. I told her, in a tone that did not invite discussion, that I needed her and Dad to hold off on sending Lainey that $12,000 for one more week. I told her I had paid for a small professional review of the company Brennan was raising money for, and I just wanted her to see it before any money moved. I told her I would even cook, but I needed all of us at the same table that following Sunday. She got quiet on the phone. Then she said, "Andrew, are you okay?" I said, "Mom, I am very okay. I just love you guys, and I'm asking for one Sunday." She agreed. Camille was next. I called her and told her everything. The dossier, Wesley, Rosalind, Bradley, the Venmo, the plan. Camille was silent for about 10 seconds, and then she said, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, Andrew, I love you, I love you, I love you." Then she said, "What do you need from us?" I told her. She said, "Done. We'll be there." I called Sullivan and asked him if he'd be willing to be there too, just on the property, parked down the street, in case Brennan did anything stupid. Sullivan, who has wanted to be a hero in a crime movie his entire life, said yes before I finished the question. Wesley I called last. He had a colleague on standby who works adjacent to the AG's Consumer Protection Division, in case we wanted to make introductions immediately. The hardest call I had to make was to Lainey. I had been ignoring her for weeks. I called her on Friday afternoon. She picked up and immediately got defensive. "Oh, so now you call." I said, "Lainey, listen to me. I'm coming to Sunday dinner. I love you. I want you to be there. And I want you to bring Brennan." She asked why. I said, "Because I want to clear the air and I want him to be there for it." There was a long pause. She said, "Are you going to apologize to him?" I genuinely had to mute the phone for 2 seconds, so I didn't laugh. I came back and said, "Lainey, I just want everyone in the same room. Will you bring him?" She said yes. She said, "Finally, you know, you've really been hurting his feelings by ignoring all this." I said, "I'm sure I have. I'll see you Sunday." Saturday I spent at home with Jocelyn. We made dinner, and I told her what was going to happen the next day. She asked one question. She said, "Are you doing this because you're angry or because it's right?" I thought about it. I said, "Both, but mostly because it's right." She nodded. She said, "Then go do it." And then she added, "But text me when it's over because I am going to be on pins and needles." Sunday morning, I got up early, hit the gym, came back, got dressed in jeans and a button-down. Nothing fancy. I printed 3 copies of a redacted summary version of the dossier, the kind a normal person could read in 15 minutes. I left the full version, with all the source documents, on a USB drive in my pocket. I put the printed copies in a manila folder. I put the manila folder in a leather portfolio I had bought specifically for this. I drove over at exactly 2 in the afternoon. When I pulled up, Brennan's Charger was already there. Camille's minivan was there. My dad's truck was there. I parked, sat in my car for 10 seconds, and I am not going to lie to you, I felt nervous. Not scared, but the way you feel before a big presentation at work. I texted Sullivan, quote, "I'm here," end quote. He texted back, quote, "On the corner, 2 houses down. Go get him," end quote. I walked up to the door. I let myself in. The smell of pot roast hit me in the face like an old friend, and for a brief second, I almost felt bad for what was about to happen in the dining room of the house I grew up in. Almost. I walked into the living room. Brennan was on the couch, holding a protein shake, of course. He looked up at me, did that little chin-up nod that guys like him do, and said, well, look who decided to show up." He grinned at the room, looking for laughs. He didn't get any this time, because Camille had been waiting for me to walk in, and she stood up the second I did, and Patrick stood up right after her, and my parents both looked up from the recliners with these slightly nervous expressions because they could already tell something was different. I said, "Hey everyone. Sorry I've been distant. I think we've got a lot to talk about today." I held up the leather portfolio and smiled. Brennan glanced at it. He said, "Oh, what's that, bro? You bring me a contract for that website finally." He looked around for a laugh. "Got none." I said, "No, Brennan. It's not a website." Mom said, "Andrew, what is going on?" I said, "Mom, can we just sit down at the table? Let's eat. And then there's something I'd like to share with the family. About Brennan's company. Before any money moves around." The room went very, very quiet. Brennan's smile didn't quite leave his face, but it tightened a little. He stood up, slowly, like he was trying to gauge what he was walking into. I gestured toward the dining room and said, "After you." We sat down at that big dining table, and the energy in the room was nothing like it had ever been. My dad served the pot roast in absolute silence. Mom kept looking at me, then at Brennan, then back at me. Lainey had her arms crossed and was already pre-irritated, the way she gets when she senses she's about to lose attention. Camille sat across from me, calm as a lake. Patrick sat next to her with the faintest possible smile. Brennan sat at the end of the table, where he'd taken to sitting like he owned the place. I let everybody take a couple of bites. Then I set my fork down. I said, "I want to start by apologizing for being distant the last couple of months." Mom softened immediately. She said, "Oh, sweetie, it's okay. We're just glad you're here." I said, "I appreciate that. The reason I asked everybody to be here today is because I love this family, and there is something I think we need to look at together before anything irreversible happens." Then I opened the portfolio. Brennan said, "What is this, bro?" I said, "Brennan, I'm going to ask you to please not call me bro for the next hour. After that, you can do whatever you want." He laughed. Nervous laugh. He said, "Okay, sure, whatever you say, Chief." I pulled out the first packet and slid it across the table to my mother. The second to Camille. I kept the third in front of me. I said, "Mom, Lainey, Brennan, I want everyone to look at the first page." The first page was a one-paragraph summary in plain English. It said, in essence, that Brennan, whose legal name was Bradley, had no registered business under the name Apex Forge Nutrition, was collecting pre-orders and investments through personal payment apps without disclosure or proper accounting, was making FDA-regulated health claims on unregistered products, and had 2 prior civil judgments in 2 states for similar schemes. My mother's eyes scanned that paragraph. Then they scanned it again. She looked up at Brennan, and her face did a thing I had never seen before. It went perfectly blank. Brennan said, "This is a joke, right?" He looked at Lainey. "Babe," he said, "tell them this is crazy." Lainey was reading her copy now. She got to the part about prior judgments, and she said, "What is this about Tampa? Bradley? Why does it say Bradley?" He said, "That's a nickname thing. My middle name is Brennan. Look, Lainey, this is your brother trying to make me look bad because he's jealous." Camille, calmly, said, "Brennan, where is your business registered?" He blinked. He said, in the process. We're, finalizing." Camille said, "Who manufactures the supplements?" He said, "That's proprietary. I have an NDA." Patrick, who is the gentlest man on the planet, said very softly, "You have an NDA with yourself, my guy." I slid the next page across to my mother. It was Wesley's investigation summary, with the public records of the prior judgments highlighted. My mother started to read. Her hands started to shake. Brennan stood up. He said, "Okay, I'm not going to sit here and let this nerd accuse me in front of my girlfriend's family." He pointed at me. "You've had it out for me since day one because you're a beta who can't handle that your sister is happy." He looked around the table for support. None came. I let him stand there. I said, "Brennan, please sit down. There's more." I pulled out my phone. I had screenshots ready. I started reading dates and amounts. On October 14th, you posted a story to Instagram saying, "Founders package, $399, ships in 8 weeks, Venmo at Brennan-Apex." I showed the screenshot. On October 20th, you took a deposit from a man named Curtis for $900 into your personal Venmo. We have a statement. On November 2nd, you told a woman named Devin, on a recorded video call, that you had FDA registration in process when no such filing exists. I went on for about 3 minutes. Just dates, amounts, names of people he had taken money from. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just read. When I finished, my father, who has barely spoken in this entire story, finally spoke. He said, "Brennan, or Bradley, whatever, I'd like you to leave my house." Brennan said, "Mr. R, This is a setup, he's a hater. My dad said, that's the point. Get out of my house. Lainey was crying now. She said, Brennan, please tell me this isn't true. He said, babe, you know me. She said, I gave you $2,300. I told my parents to give you $12,000. He said, I was going to pay you back. That money is for the launch. That's how investments work. Camille, very quietly, said, except there's no business. So there's no investment. I said one more thing. Brennan, you have two options. Option 1, you pay back every single person on this list, starting with Lainey, in the next 30 days. Option 2, my attorney delivers everything in this folder, plus a few things not in this folder, to the Consumer Protection Division of the State Attorney General's office on Tuesday morning. The meeting is already on the calendar. Either way, you are out of my sister's life, out of my parents' bank account, and out of this house. Tonight. He looked at me for a long second. His face did the thing I had been hoping to see, the thing where the bravado collapses, and you can suddenly see the small, scared man underneath. He said, this is so messed up, bro. I said, I asked you not to call me bro. He left, slammed the front door, tore out of the driveway in his Charger so loudly that Sullivan, parked 2 houses down, texted me a single laughing emoji. What happened next was the part of this story I think about the most. My mom started crying. Real crying. She came around the table and hugged me, and she said, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. My dad just stood there, hands on his hips, shaking his head at the floor. He looked older than I'd ever seen him look. He said, son, I owe you an apology too. We've taken you for granted. We laughed at things that weren't funny. I'm sorry. Here's how it all shook out. Brennan, that is to say Bradley, did not pay anyone back. He fled Charlotte within about a week. Rosalind walked the dossier into the AG's office on schedule, and the state opened an investigation. About 4 months later, they brought him up on charges. Wesley had connected our case to a list of other complaints that had been quietly piling up. Last I heard, he is working at a different gym in a different state, telling a different woman he is about to launch a supplement company. Some habits do not break. My parents repaired what they could. Lainey enrolled in community college that next semester. She is studying accounting, which she says she chose because, quote, I want to be the kind of person who can read a balance sheet, end quote. I have never been prouder of her. My relationship with my parents has changed in a way I didn't quite expect. We are closer than we have ever been, and more honest than we have ever been. My dad and I started a Saturday morning thing where we go to a diner on the south side and eat eggs and talk about nothing for 2 hours. It's the best thing in my week. And Jocelyn, reader, I asked her to marry me 5 months after that Sunday. She said yes before I'd fully gotten the question out. We're getting married next fall. Sullivan is the best man. Wesley is a groomsman. Camille is officiating, and Lainey, my hot mess of a little sister, is one of Jocelyn's bridesmaids. I think about that Sunday dinner sometimes. The original one. The one where a guy in a too tight black t-shirt looked across the table at me, decided I was the safest target in the room, and started a chain of events that ended with him losing my sister, my parents' respect, and his freedom. I think about how I just smiled and didn't say a word. Here's the thing I want to leave you with. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes silence is just a man taking notes. I'm Andrew. Thanks for listening.